While Bela Lugosi may have made Dracula suave, Christopher Lee made him sexy.
I am Dracula.
I'm gonna make him an offer again.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Dance off, bro! Me and you!
Hey guys, welcome back to Draculathon, and in this, our third episode, we will be taking a look at the British answer to Hollywood's Dracula. Universal Studios made themselves into Hollywood's House of Horror in the 1930s and 40s, with films such as Frankenstein, The Mummy, and of course, Dracula. In the late 1950s, Hammer Films in the UK began remaking these classics for a new generation, thus becoming a well-renowned house of horror themselves. In 1958, they remade Dracula, which was called Horror of Dracula in America in order to avoid confusion with the Lugosi version. With a runtime of only 82 minutes, this version saw some significant changes to the plot. As a major example, which doesn't spoil anything because it's right at the beginning of the film, Jonathan Harker in the book is a real estate agent who travels to Dracula's castle in order to sell him a property in London, and he has no idea that Dracula is a vampire. However, in this movie, Harker is a vampire hunter already and knows what Dracula is, and only travels to the castle under the pretext of being a librarian, but his true motive is to kill the Count. Without getting into too many spoiler details for the rest of the movie, let's just say that there are a lot of differences in this version when compared with the source material. Despite all the plot changes, in many ways this movie does a lot to modernize the Dracula fable by showing more gore, violence, and sexuality than what was allowed in Universal's version of nearly 30 years prior. In the opening titles, we already get our first taste of blood as we see beautiful Technicolor red blood splatter all over Drac's coffin. Whereas the older Dracula adaptations were not allowed to show much of anything when it comes to the gory details, here we get to see, unobscured for the first time, blood dripping from the fangs, stakes going through hearts, and bodies crumbling away to dust. It's nothing by today's standards, but for the time it was a big leap forward for what could be shown on screen. Another major advancement for what could be shown on screen was the sexual perverseness that's so much a part of Dracula's character. If you think about it, what vampires do is very sexual. They come into your room at night, penetrate you, and consume your liquids, sometimes even asking you to consume their liquids also. So of course there is a lot of implied sexuality with vampires, and while again, by modern standards, this movie doesn't show much at all, it does a lot more to lean into these implied innuendos than any previous adaptation had. While it's easy to write off Hammer Films' Dracula as being a bare-bones adaptation, it is important to remember its place in history. Dracula 1958 made major strides in the genre, showing fans of Dracula things that they had never been allowed to see before. And I also might add, in glorious Technicolor. And let's not forget the great, over-the-top, bombastic score. Like the rest of the movie, it was bold and exciting. And Christopher Lee, as the Count, with his glowing red eyes and dripping fangs, does as much to cement himself as a major influence on how pop culture thinks of Dracula as what Bela Lugosi did with his accent a generation before. Well, thank you for watching. We are inching ever closer to Halloween with each new entry into Draculathon. There's 2 more entries to go, so don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you there. Until next time, good night.